Thanks for the opportunity to speak to all of you. I'm going to be talking about biosecurity today, and I'm going to focus in on assessing and reducing risks of fish diseases on farms. My name is Dr. Myron Kebas, and I'm going to lay out for you how I've approached fish biosecurity, and we're going to talk about the 14-point biosecurity steps. Next. So the World Organization of Animal Health, used to be called OIE, has put together a number of different writings about biosecurity and what should be in a plan. And they start by defining biosecurity in aquaculture as a set of management and physical measures designed to reduce the risk of introducing, establishing, spreading pathogenic agents to, from, and within an aquatic animal population. And it's kind of important, for us to have similar kind of definitions of what biosecurity is. This has been put together by a international organization, and it's one that many people have adopted. Next. So they also, they talk about what is a biosecurity plan. You're probably thinking, what is a plan? I guess it would be something that I write. What do I write? How do I write it? Well, there's guidances out there how to do it. And again, the World Organization of Animal Health has talked about it being a plan that identifies significant potential pathways for the introduction and spread of disease in a zone or compartment. Okay, now you're think about your farm, and describe some measures that are or will be applied in order to mitigate the risk of introducing the spread of disease. So think about your farm and what kind of things you can do to keep pathogens from entering your farm. And the plan also describes how these measures are audited. Like, how do you keep track? How do you make sure that it's really getting done? And also, in respect to both implementation and their targeting. So how do you ensure that it's being regularly assessed and adjusted accordingly? Next slide. So there are fish pathogens emerging all the time. Here's a list of just some, in the past more than 10 years. So what I want to talk about a little bit now is, what's the relationship between a pathogen and disease and risk? So is everything that we find a problem? Is it going to be a problem for you? And how do you assess that? Next slide. So one thing to keep in perspective, here's a paper in Human Medicine. So this is an interesting study where they looked at viruses in humans, in us, and they found 569 they had 569 human donors across 4 different continents, and they were testing their antibodies to see how they interacted with 206 human viruses and over 1,000 strains. And one of the interesting things they found was, in some people, there were as many as 10 different viruses present in those people. Excuse me, and 84 species in at least 2 individuals. So we know also from veterinary medicine that just the presence of a virus doesn't mean disease. Viruses are within us and our animals as part of the normal environment, but some of them can be a real problem. Next slide. So some other work that's interesting is, they looked at, there's been 219 different viral species that are known to infect humans. And some of them are very serious, like the first, yellow fever and others that have been identified. Next slide. The important thing to consider is, in this paper looked at it, what does that mean? Now, if you look at this figure in the bottom that's with the yellow bars, think of the virus entering from the bottom going up. And so, or think about your fish. In order for there to be a viral disease or bacterial disease or any disease occur, first, your fish would have to get exposed to the organism. But even if they get exposed, they need to be infected for it to go further. So you can have tanks of fish that may be exposed to a virus, but it may not actually infect the fish. And at each level, it's a smaller portion of the population. And there, when you have infection, okay, you still don't have disease. Because if the organism is one that maybe infects individuals, but then isn't transmitted or spread, transmission being it doesn't grow in one fish and then get released into the environment and spread to others. So you see there's a number of different steps before you get to level 4, where you have an epidemic or you have a disease outbreak. So it's important to keep that in mind, and keeping it in mind that when you find something, how do you put it in perspective? And that's where veterinarians and fish health experts can help you put that in perspective. So next slide, please. The other thing is, when we start looking at risk, we really have this concept of, okay, risk is, what is the likelihood for a disease to occur? How likely is it to show up on your farm? And the other part of it is, if it does show up, how big of a deal is it? What's the consequence? And that influences whether a lot of these fish diseases end up being considered regulatory. Next slide. And here's an example of a condition you see in yellow perch called heterosporosis. And the whitish areas that almost look like they've been put in a frying pan and cooked for a few minutes, that's actually what the perch anglers were noticing in northern Wisconsin more than 20 years ago. That led to the detection of this particular parasite that affects the mussel. So those white areas are very heavily, densely concentrations of this parasite. And I bring this up because, again, we come back to this issue. So how likely is this to show up on your perch farm? And if it does, how big of a problem would it be? Next slide. And we look at this among a lot of different diseases. And this is something that you'll see, this matrix, and you'll see on the top consequences rating. So it might be the consequences are insignificant, or at the other end of the scale, catastrophic. Similarly, the likelihood estimates, which is in the kind of left-hand bar, it goes from, the likelihood would be remote to pretty likely or certain. So that's where we kind of look at some of our fish diseases and decide where to put them in. If you go to the lower right-hand corner, you see AI, that's avian influenza in poultry. Some of you may be aware of it. Maybe some of you are familiar with poultry production to some extent. That's something we've been seeing quite frequently in North America and around the world. And when it happens, it's catastrophic. Well, how do our fish diseases compare to that? And that's where part of what we do in trying to figure out and assess um, where the diseases of concern fit. So next slide. And similar, here's another way to look at it, like what is the risk level? And it might be a negligible risk, and no action would be required, or acceptable risk, or in some cases, there are some fish pathogens, depending on the species you're working with, you want to be aware of and know how to respond to. Next slide. Probably most of your losses are going to occur to pathogens such as flavobacteria and external parasites such as protozoas, if Ichthyopteris, Trichodina, Ichthyoboto, Spironucleus. That's going to cause a lot of your losses on your fish farms. This is a picture of rainbow trout fingerlings affected with Spironucleus. Causes a condition in the digestive tract, and it causes high mortalities in fish under a year old. Next slide. So I'm going to present to you what I've put together in terms of 14-point biosecurity principles, and it's a voluntary program, and you can use it and you can modify it, and it is designed to address the critical points that can impact disease on your farm. Next slide. So how do we do this? We look at the 14-point principles. We write a plan, or you write a plan for your farm. You have your plan reviewed and audited, and you revisit it at least annually to kind of update it on new information, and particularly revising it when there's new disease information that comes in the region or in your state, or you start changing your farm practices, like raising different species. Next slide. So here they are. Here's the first 8. So I'm going to talk about the ones that are in yellow. And so the different elements here is, the biosecurity responsibilities. Who is responsible? I will talk about that one. But and then training, like how do you train everyone to be on the same page on your farm? And I'm going to talk about these 2 terms of line of separation and perimeter buffer area, because they're universally used throughout biosecurity and in animal husbandry. Beef, dairy, swine, fish, poultry. Number 5 is personnel, and there is, how are you addressing the what you're wearing, what you have on your shoes, what you have on your body, wild birds and predators as a vehicle to bring in some of these organisms, and then equipment and vehicles. That's a big one. And then mortality disposal. When fish die and you take them out, disposing them in a way that doesn't allow for the spread of more disease on the farm. Next slide. Number 9 is waste management, how you're removing the feces and organic matter from your systems. A big one is number 10, replacement fish. What do you do to ensure that the fish that you're bringing in are not harboring certain pathogens that could really present a problem. I mean, this is probably the biggest way that you can introduce fish disease problems onto your farm. Water quality or water supply is a big one too, depending on your water source. Feed, and then reporting of elevated morbidity and mortality. And 14 is audits. So next slide. So what should these be like? They should really, in some ways, if this all comes together, right, it should be able to reduce testing requirements, and it also should, support that. The challenge is for it to be verified, and some of this you maybe hear from some other presenters is being addressed on the national level with the CAPS program from USDA. They're taking this approach of incorporating these kinds of steps and then to help reduce testing. Next slide. So number one, biosecurity responsibility. Who's in charge? It's important to have one person in charge so that they know, because if you say, well, we're all kind of responsible, then it generally is harder to direct that way. So, and if you're a small farm, it's going to be you. And if you're in a larger farm, it still needs to be one individual who is kind of directing it all. So next slide. So the other part is then training. So that person kind of directing the training so that everyone knows, okay, this is what we're doing here on the farm. This is where, when we go to this part of the farm, this is what we need to do in terms of whether it's baths or whether it's hand disinfection or boots, and all the new workers need to be trained on it. Next slide. So, and if you're looking for more training opportunities, you have this online course that I developed with Dr. Chris Hartlib, and that's available through the Northern Aquaculture Demonstration Facility. It goes through 5 modules, some of the really essential things that producers need to know about fish health, including how fish health inspections get done, fish health assessments, very much like the necropsies that are going to be carried out during this course. So you can go and check it out there. Next slide. Line of separation. It's a functional line. It's separating the fish buildings and the fish inside from what's outside. And you map your farm and you listen, and then you write in your plan what's going to be the difference when you cross that line and enter in. So next slide. I'm going to give you some another definition. That's perimeter buffer area, and that is the area outside it. You can think of, let's say, if you have a building, you have your fish in there, you still have all this movement going on in your farm outside of that building and around the building and the ponds. For a lot of you, the perimeter buffer area is probably going to be the edge of your property. Next slide. And that line is that separation, and this is kind of an illustration, and it's something that you see on some of the larger farms, but you can see it's illustrating this individual entered in from the right, changed their clothes, sit on a bench, moved over, and then put on dedicated clothes for while they're working in the facilities. And fish farms are going in this direction as well. Next slide. And this kind of illustrates the buffer area and the lines of separation, you can think this is a you can think of these individual units. Let's say if they are your different buildings where you have different species of fish. Again, before you go from the outside and cross that red line, what sort of steps are you going to have everyone do? And some of the basic ones are going to be foot baths, and in terms of equipment or anything that's brought in, if it's going to be brought in, it's going to be disinfected, or it's not going to be brought in at all because you have dedicated equipment inside and that equipment doesn't come out. Next slide. So, and it can be as simple as this, working on a picture or a drawing of your farm and then mapping it out. And there's people like myself who can help you with these. Next slide. Some people go to further extents and kind of delineate it this way. Next slide. And I'm going to, this gives even more detail in terms of like, if you have vehicles coming in and out, what's the area that you're going to, clean them? This is an example of like a decontamination corridor or an area. But when you look at it, there's different zones from there, being right on the farm, that's kind of the hot zone. And, the road is kind of, warm. And then on the other side is kind of more of a cold zone. So next slide. This is an example of an image of a trout farm. And it shows in yellow, that's the perimeter buffer area. You see the vehicles are coming in here in the lower bottom on the road, one way in and one way out. And then these lines of separation occur in, for example, a hatchery that may be separated from the outdoor raceways. One of the basic principles, of course, is always really reducing the opportunity for pathogens to go from older fish to younger fish. So your hatchery is going to have very strict biosecurity to try to prevent your introducing either on your clothes, your equipment, water, feed, organisms that are really going to be a problem for the young fish. Next slide. And again, with the personnel, it's just personal protective equipment. What are you going to have folks wear with fish? The big thing is if you're wet and your jacket is wet, or your clothes are wet, your boots are wet, you have an opportunity to harbor some disease organisms maybe you picked up, particularly if you've gone to another farm or you've been in a lake or a river. Those are really critical points where you can really risk bringing something into your farm. Next slide. So equipment, a plan for cleaning and disinfecting, and again, restricting the movement. If you can afford to, dedicating equipment, particularly in a hatchery, it's a way to go. And again, vehicle access and how you have people coming and going. What is the potential they may be bringing something in? Next slide. And the bigger farms, there's logs of these to keep track of who came, where they're from, and some farms require even more details. Next slide. Mortality disposal. The important thing is not to let, one of the first things is if you're really going to benefit by getting mortalities out as fast as possible and getting them out of the water. The longer they're in the water, the more they're going to spread pathogens to other fish. But when you take them out, disposing them in a way that there's not a potential for animals to get into them, or insects and rodents, and then to move some of that infected tissue to other parts of your farm. Next slide. Replacement fish is a big deal. And there it's really, what do you know about the health status of the fish that you're getting? Do you have a health certificate? What what pathogens were looked for? What general findings were there? Next slide. And here's an example of the Wisconsin Fish Health Certificate. On the top, it's going to have information on the farm that you're getting your fish from, their water source, whoever did the inspection, and then in the bottom part is going to list the different pathogens that were tested for. Next slide. Water supply, of course. If you're using groundwater, we generally think of that as being pathogen free. If you're using surface water, like from a stream or a lake, we're generally thinking that it's not going to be pathogen free. So it's two very different situations in terms of where you're getting your water from. Groundwater presents a much lower risk of introducing disease. Next slide. Feed. And one of the big things with feed is, what is the difference between, are you bringing in live feed or commercial formulated feed? Commercial formulated feed is going to be heated to a level that is going to destroy pathogens that will be present, and there's testing, so it's a very low risk source. But if you're bringing in like forage fish, fathead minnows or golden shiners, suckers, other fish, there you have an opportunity to introduce some pathogens. So you have to consider that, and then think about how you're going to reduce or mitigate that risk. Next slide. So reporting elevated mortality, and this is a really important one, and that is, what are you going to do when things go wrong? And how do you know when it's wrong? Next slide. So I'm going to suggest that 10% or less annual mortality might be acceptable. So if you have, like, this is very small farm talk here, 1,500 fish, tilapia aquaponic facility, and you might expect to lose no more than 150 fish in a 12-month period. And this is roughly about 12 and a half fish dying per month, or roughly 3 fish dying per week. So that would be an example of, like, setting the bar, that if you had a week where you've got more than 3 fish dying a week, what are you going to do? Who are you going to call? What is that going to set off as a trigger? This is really important. This is a fundamental principle of animal production. It has been for all the successful farms over all the different species. So next slide. And we've got a ways to go, because if you look at mortality rates in a lot of other animals that are raised, they're much lower, 1 to 4 or 5%, with fish, it's quite a bit higher. Next slide. In fact, you'll even hear things like we get 60% survival, and that's better than the rest of the farms. That really suggests an underlying problem, and you really want to look into it, because you're losing money. If you are have mortalities that you're not accounting for, in many cases, you're feeding fish to an extent, you've already paid for the feed, you've already paid for the time, and then if you lose those fish, you're not going to generate any revenues from that. So economically, this is a really important thing to get a handle on. Next slide. And the last part of it is auditing, like who's going to look at it and how are they going to look at it with you. Next slide. And there's forms that have been developed. This is one that I developed, modified, that are out there, where you can have someone else come in and kind of check through, and then go through what's working and what may need improvement. Next slide. And I'll leave you with, in some ways, some of the main risks in fish is going to be those fish that you introduce onto your farm. Another big one is going to be potentially equipment, nets, boats. If they're going to other farms or going to out in public waters, and inherently, water supply can be a big risk factor if you're not using groundwater. I just put the poultry example up there because in other areas it's different. Like for them, it's people bring in disease and equipment and air intake. So it's different in different sectors. So next slide. So with that, thank you, and I'll leave the remainder for questions.